So recently I reviewed Pac-Man Museum Plus, and as a TLDR for those who haven't watched it, the selection of games is strong, although how they are presented was my big critique of the collection. If anyone enjoys the collection, I don't want them to think they no longer can because some YouTuber wasn't a fan. Nonetheless, it did feel like some corners were being cut. As you might have collected from the title, I was involved in some drama recently, and it stemmed from this part of the video. As a forward, let me just mention this game hits you with the Unity logo when you boot it up. Let that just set the stage for everything I'm about to say. A lot of great games have been made in Unity, but it's less promising when you take into consideration that it's Unity handling the emulation of all these games. Before moving forward, I want to make it clear I have no problem with Unity as an engine. As shown in the clip, Cuphead was made in Unity, and that's one of my favorite games. There's no good or bad game engines. However, every game engine does have things it will excel or struggle with. Unity is probably the best game engine of choice for a lot of developers and their games. What was being questioned is its use here to run emulations of old arcade games not made for Unity, when in the past, engines have been made in-house by big studios such as Namco to specifically handle old ROMs and collections like this. I received many comments on the video, and it seemed what I was trying to say was understood here, especially from viewers of my own who know my past experiences with game dev and previous support I have shown towards up-and-coming game developers on multiple occasions, because none of said comments on the video itself were about this specific part of the video. That was until GameMaker's Toolkit made a tweet that read,
"My fellow YouTubers, I implore you, stop talking about game engines. It's embarrassing, and these silly misinformed stereotypes only hurt the game dev community."
Which, while I feel the wording is a bit intense, I totally agree with the sentiment they're making, because it's true. Game engines such as Unity have a very negative perception tied to them that could potentially hurt future game devs that choose to use the engine. Well, unless their point was that content creators shouldn't ever talk about game engines, period, which I highly doubt, because gatekeeping any conversation about it at all would literally go against the point of their entire channel. However, where things get spicy is that despite agreeing with what they are saying, my review was clipped in such a way where it made it seem as if I was blaming Unity for all the issues I had with the game. I would like to think that given the full context, most would understand that's not the point I intended to make. At the very least, it's not what I believe. Regardless, I was basically used as their public, "don't do this, this is bad" example. The responses were very disparaging of me for sure, especially when I tried to clarify and defend myself on Twitter, which I gotta say, trying to explain yourself to people who only know you through a single disapproving clip, not a great idea. GameMaker's Toolkit, for those unaware, is a YouTube channel that discusses game design and holds giant summer game jams. Not a small fry channel at all. Nearly 1.3 million subscribers on YouTube. In fact, in this scenario, I'm definitely the small fry here. They make some great videos, and I've been subscribed to them for a long time. There are some great content creators like Vimlark, Mizziziziz, and Goodgus I would absolutely recommend that do similar game dev content, but GMTK are basically the big boys. Their game jam recaps are really inspiring stuff, and I always look forward to checking out each year's submissions. I want to make it clear the intention of this video isn't to call them out back. Again, I enjoy their content. The intention of this response is to clarify my opinion on the matter, and defend myself because being vilified by a fanbase much bigger than my own for something I don't even believe has been extremely anxiety-inducing. Let's start this topic by talking about game engines, including Unity. As I said earlier, I believe there are no good or bad game engines. However, every game engine is going to have its pros and cons. Something I'm sure GameMaker's Toolkit would agree with is that knowing the engine best suited for your game project is super important. Because sure, there might not be such a thing as a best engine, but there could be an engine that is best suited for your purposes specifically, because they all excel at different things. I'm a game developer myself, and I absolutely love it. I've been making games since middle school, when I was using ActionScript to make shitty Flash games. These days, I've landed on GameMaker because I like the GML2 programming language. That's why the arguments of not denouncing a game because it was made in a certain game engine really resonates with me. With a name like GameMaker, and especially with its advertised drag and drop system, which I can tell you right now, most serious projects in the engine won't be using that. I mean, yeah, most people will look at GameMaker like it's some kind of joke, but that attitude completely undermines the fact that there are great games that have been made at the engine. And trust me, there are tons. Hyper Light Drifter, Forager, Chicory, Deltarune, Rivals of Aether, all of these were made of GameMaker, and all of these are great. People shouldn't think these projects weren't a serious undertaking just because they were done in GameMaker. There's no such thing as a say make a game button in any engine. And most game projects, despite the engine, take a lot more time and effort than most people realize. But despite GameMaker being my engine of choice, I wouldn't lie to you and tell you it should be used for every game project. Weak point of GameMaker? Not great for 3D. That's not to say 3D games can't be made of GameMaker, but it's going to be a much more difficult process than if you were to just use an engine like Unity. The other big talking point here is emulation, so let's talk about that. Let's be honest here. Emulation is not easy. It's very prone to the most minute difference f***ing everything up. Even more so than scripting a game from scratch, I'd argue. Nintendo made their own N64 emulator in-house for Nintendo Switch Online, and they still got some shit wrong. People will all come together working hard as hell on an emulator, and it will still take several years until they even run mostly correct. Even Dolphin, one of the best emulators constantly praised for its accuracy, still continues to get multiple updates and bug fixes to this day. Emulation is something you have to be extremely careful with, which is why in most situations, bigger studios will often make custom in-house engines or emulators for their projects. When Sega made Sonic Mega Collection, which is often touted as one of the best retro collections ever, they partnered with VR1 Japan to do specifically that. And given the praise that game still receives, I would say it was worth it. This being said, I don't blame Unity for its handling of emulation. In fact, the emulation is still done via an emulator. Unity, in this scenario, just acting as the mediator, which is at least how I've been told to understand it over the years, which I fully admit, it's something that I should have made a point to clarify in the review. However good or bad it may be as an emulation mediator, the emulation itself is still the other half. This being said, I don't blame Unity. I blame Namco for taking the easy way out using Unity as that mediator. And to clarify before I'm taken out of context, Unity is not some effortless cheat option for game development. Making anything with any engine takes a lot of work, but using any engine at all is definitely easier than making one to specifically handle emulation, despite it being done in the past for game collections, and to good results. For a studio as big as Namco and with an IP as recognizable as Pac-Man to be like, okay, here's a collection of games, most of which were not made in Unity, we're using Unity for this one, when they've made custom in-house engines in the past to handle their museum games, none of which have the latency problems I mentioned in this review, it becomes obvious that Unity is not being used because it would have been better than an in-house engine, but rather because Unity is so versatile, it's capable of being the foundation of a collection like this, without having to put additional money into R&D to make something else. And there are very clear signs in Museum Plus that it wasn't a full effort endeavor. Stuff like them using the wrong cabinet for Battle Royale, or the screen scaling obscuring instructions, using Japanese ROMs for games that have fully translated English ROMs, washed out colors on certain emulators, dip switches from the original game boards not being present despite all of that being in the PS1 Namco museums. All of this being said, the Unity logo didn't worry me because I think Unity is bad, because I don't think that, and it's why I even followed up with, a lot of great games have been made in Unity. It worried me, because beyond it seemingly being used for every half-effort retro game collection, all of the collections of retro games I personally played that are presented through Unity seem to have input latency to some degree. Stuff like Museum Plus and Arcade Pack have it to a fairly blatant degree, I'd argue. In a collection like Mega Drive Classics, the latency is less noticeable, but it's still there. Many people have claimed that it's not Unity's fault that the latency exists when running these emulations. I haven't seen any proof of this claim, but I also don't have any proof that it does outside my own personal experience of said Unity collections. It could be totally possible that something just wasn't optimized correctly. I would think that unavoidably, if you're using an engine to run something not made for that engine, some amount of latency would be inevitable, but I'll accept for the sake of argument that isn't the case. That being said, regardless of what may or may not be at fault, I don't think it's fair to say Unity is undeniably better than anything Namco could have made when it came to handling these emulations. Unity was probably the best engine for a lot of games. Hat in Time, Cuphead, Risk of Rain, all great games made in Unity I have zero technical issues with. But much like how GameMaker's specialty isn't 3D games, Unity's specialty definitely is not running emulators for arcade games of the 80s. And sure, it's not like this is the worst handling of ROMs ever. If people have no problem with the emulation in Museum Plus, then more power to you. And yeah, there's also the possibility that Namco could have made something that emulated all of this worse than Unity. But the fact they didn't think it was worth their time and money to try at all is what disappointed me personally. Anyone who is familiar with my content should already know that I'm a huge supporter of game development. No matter what is made or how it's made, I want to support indie game dev because, no offense to other YouTubers, I think it's more admirable than what I mostly do. When I made a video about WeTank's fan games a while back, I covered tons of different games all designed designed through a plethora of different game engines. And not once in the entire half-an-hour video did I explicitly point out what a dev used to make their game. Why? Because I don't think it mattered. What matters to me was the end product, but the end product is why I mentioned it in my Museum Plus review. Because again, beyond the other oversights in Museum Plus, it seems an in-house engine would have been better suited for a collection like this. All of this brings us to the way in which Game Maker's Toolkit decided to clip my video. For context, the clip was from the middle of the video where I was transitioning to my critiques of Museum Plus, and when I said, "It's less promising when you take into consideration that it's Unity handling the emulation of all these games," that wasn't the start of a Unity rant. That was the end of a statement claiming the logo made me worried in this scenario. But because the clip is cut after me talking about the borders, it's framed in a way where people who didn't watch the video will believe I'm saying the border thing is Unity's fault, when not being able to turn off borders has nothing to do with the Unity engine. I had not received any comments about it, and it seemed every viewer knew what I was talking about up until GMTK clipped it in the way that they did. Only then, since most people don't have the context of the full review or my other content, was there confusion about what I was saying. I do not want to hold this one instance against them, and I acknowledge I could have explained myself better in the review, but I was disappointed in how I feel I was represented in the original tweet, because again, this seemed super out of character for Game Maker's Toolkit, a channel that is generally really supportive. However, this doesn't feel or even act like a post meant to inform. It both feels and acts like a call-out post. If they were to make the same general tweet, but without the clip, the point they were trying to make would have come across perfectly fine. That point being, don't completely disregard a game engine, and definitely don't disregard a game just because it was made in a certain game engine. That's an argument I can get behind, and hopefully other people can too. But framing it in the context of my video, that wasn't even about that, turns a tweet with a message into a tweet where the majority of replies are only going to express how cringy and stupid they think I am. Basically, including an actual clip from a YouTuber and saying, "Don't do this thing this guy did," is going to make the tweet more about said person opposed to the message itself. And that's exactly what happened. Look, I've been a fan of Game Maker's Toolkit for years. I genuinely love their content, and will likely continue to watch them, despite all the hate that's been directed at me from all this drama, since it was so atypical to what they generally post. However, to me, the original tweet as well as the replies were highly combative. At the same time, while I do have some game dev experience, I certainly don't know everything, and I'm always looking to learn. GMTK even recommended to talk to an expert, and since it seems like they are presenting themselves as an expert, or at least someone who knows more than I do, I am more than willing to have a real conversation about this, instead of being openly mocked online by a fanbase, or told to do better by a slew of people who wouldn't have said anything otherwise. I don't know, it just doesn't feel great to be punched down on by such a large channel. If I would have been sent a private message by Game Maker's Toolkit, or any channel this big, especially from a content creator I already liked and was subbed to, and they expressed their concerns of how they thought what I said was harmful, I would have 100% talked to them about it and made a public statement. Because if the only thing people gathered from that part of the review is that Unity is a bad engine, I am more than willing to clear that up, because that is not what I believe or was trying to say. But instead, this was immediately turned into a public call-out I could hardly do anything about, given they have a Twitter following with over 100,000 more followers than my own. Having an opinion projected onto me, and then being belittled for something I don't even believe, and then seeing them continue upvoting other replies dogpiling on me. I'm not gonna beat around the bush, it sucks. I make tons of mistakes, and I totally accept that I often need to word statements in a more clear way so that newer viewers that are watching me for the first time can understand the point I'm trying to make without having to know more of my content. This is clearly one of those times I should have worked on that. If Game Maker's Toolkit doesn't know me or what I've said in other videos, that's not their fault. Not everyone is going to have the time to go through my whole catalog, and they shouldn't have to. But again, that's why I would have appreciated it if they talked to me about it first, instead of using me as their poster boy on an argument in which I would otherwise be on their side with. And I wanted to make all of this clear, not only for any viewers that got the impression I was ragging on Unity, but to also stand up for myself, because I really wasn't able to do that on Twitter given its Twitter. At this point in time, thousands of people, including game devs I respect, now think I have this vendetta against Unity I don't actually have, and I felt YouTube was the only platform left where I could denounce that allegation. And if you're a content creator with a huge following, unless you just don't give two shits about what happens on my end, I would genuinely appreciate it if you were to message me first so we can talk, instead of jumping straight to a call-out post, because I promise I don't bite. And if you are someone who asserts themselves on being a gateway to learning and conversation, I would like to have that conversation instead of, having shit like this sent to me. Twitter.